important reports to consider this morning. I anticipate we'll deal with those in our usual efficient manner. Nick, can you provide us with and apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. I haven't received any apologies for this morning, although I know I think Councillor Carruthers may be about to give me one.
David Ingles, it is an apology. Yep.
Okay, so we have an apology from Councillor Ingles, and we have 20 members present at the start of the meeting.
Okay. Agenda item 2 is members' declaration of interest. Does any member have any declaration of interest that they wish to make at this point? Nope. Item number 3 is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 3rd of December 2019. Is everybody happy to approve those minutes? Yep. Okay. Item number 4 is the budget setting process for financial year 2020/21. This report provides members with an update on the Council's agreed budget process timetable in light of the changes to both the UK and Scottish budget processes. Members will be aware that this Council set out a comprehensive budget process timetable in June 2019, which anticipated certain key dates in relation to the announcements of the UK and Scottish budgets. As intimated by members during full Council in December, our own budget setting process was required to be altered. Prior to this paper being published, the Vice Chair and I met with group leaders and finance spokesperson to discuss the process set out in this paper. The report updates on these matters and sets out a proposed revision to the timetable as was agreed by group leaders and finance spokespersons. Paul Garrett is here to assist us with any questions that members have, and I'll open it up for member debate. Is there any member wishes to make a contribution? Elaine?
Yes, I think there is an omission on the timetable, in that obviously there will be discussion and proposed budgets put forward and published on the 25th of February prior to the discussions on 27th. But I think I would suggest that we should have the finalised budget should be published a couple of days in advance of final discussions on the 26th of March, because that enables the public to see what the different groups are proposing. And I would like to suggest that we put that in addition, saying that finalised political groups publish their finalised budget proposals, which obviously would include policy development and any amendments to the capital strategy, and that those should be published 2 days in advance of the 26th of March.
Paul?
Absolutely, if that's what members agree, happy to support that.
Stephen?
Same point, Chair.
Is there any other? Willie?
Thanks, Chair. By all accounts, Chair, it looks like an ambitious one, given that we've just got the draft budget from the Scottish Government, and from Sunday, from what I heard on TV, it doesn't look that there's anyone coming forward to agree or be part of the draft budget with the Scottish Government. So it is an ambitious target. I just wonder what would happen if it isn't agreed. Or there's no agreement reached between the political parties at Holyrood. The other part on the programme would be, I take it when we do finally sit down to meet, that this time there will be amendments if that is appropriate at the full Council when we do sit down to agree the budget.
Paul?
In terms of the first question, it said there's been no political deal yet to secure the Scottish Government's budget at this stage. I know there are discussions ongoing between the Scottish Government and COSLA and also with the political groups. At the moment, to get a bit more clarity on when and whether there's likely to be a deal and when that may become apparent, we're waiting for further information in that respect at this stage. The terms are that if no deal is reached, the Scottish Government doesn't finalise and secure its budget, then the current budget continues into the new year while that process continues. But we're certainly hopeful that things will be clarified as soon as possible on that.
I think in relation to your second point, Willie, we have an agreed process, and what the leader has suggested is that before the meeting on the 26th of March, that we follow the process that we've went through in the last couple of years, that budgets or any budget proposals are published 2 days in advance of that full Council meeting and handed into the Section 95 officer with 5 days in advance That's a process that we've went through the last couple of years, and therefore every budget proposal from any group would be up for discussion and therefore as well would be available to the public.
Chair, I'm asking if there, there were amendments that weren't taken. Are we going to take them this year, notwithstanding what you said in terms of what happened in the past? I take it that we will be accepting amendments this year if there are amendments come forward.
I think that would be down to based on if they're competent on the day. Yeah. Ivor.
Chair, first time here for a while, so excuse me if I've just not caught up with it. So what we're being asked is that we don't set a budget on the 27th of February, but we do it on the 26th of March. Is that what, or am I getting that kind of wrong? Another thing is, within the letter that came from the, I was going to say Cabinet Secretary, but the Minister for Finance, it says that they can revisit the budget if it's significantly different. Now, if it's significantly different in a negative way for councils, how can we set a budget if we need to set it within a balanced budget for a year on the 27th of February if we set it and then it's 3 or 4 million different?
Paul.
Yes, in relation to the first point, what members are being asked to do on the 27th of February is set the council tax in the context of a balanced budget. That is set out in the report as the legislative requirements. Members are being asked to balance their budget specifically for financial year 2020-21 at that stage. But as reflected in the report, there is room for flexibility around about that in terms of coming back and finalising certain terms within the budget at the later date, which is in this timetable as the March meeting of full council. But we must set the council tax based on a balanced budget position. In terms of the second point, absolutely a very valid concern that there is a possibility of the Scottish Government reopening the budget at some later date. There's no provision for that to happen between the 11th of March UK budget announcement and the start of the new financial year. And certainly it's been very clear the Scottish Government have taken what they call a prudent approach to the budget that they announced last week. They've based that on the Barnett consequentials arising from the September UK Government budget announcement. The indication is there's very little risk of a downside change to the settlement. It's not anticipated that we'll see any reduction in funding from the announced levels. Couldn't discount that as a potential risk, but it's certainly seen as being a minor risk at this stage.
Jane.
Well, it seems to be that now we've actually got the revenue budget, and we know that arguably the revenue budgets are not nearly as stiff as we all thought they were probably going to be, whereas the capital budgets are really rather more difficult. I'm slightly with Ivor on this one. We've got to produce a balanced budget on the 26th of February. And there are two ways of looking at this. From a point of view of a daft lassie, there's an opportunity for people to come forward with their proposals on the 26th and to then table them, put them all down, decide them, etc., and then to debate. And arguably, what this gives us is the opportunity then to say, oh, well, actually, maybe a month later, we don't terribly like what we decided on the 27th of February and change our minds completely. If I've got that right. I mean, maybe I'm open to suggestion, but it might well be the case that that's what this would allow us to do, to change things considerably. I'm a little concerned about the uncertainty there is. If you decide on taking savings a month earlier, it's always easier actually to get things going management-wise, if that's what you're going to do in a year, to make certain you do actually achieve the savings. Because after all, later on, we're going to discover that £1 million of the savings which we had proposed are actually not being taken. So if I could have some advice, please, as to whether I'm right that we could actually completely change things within that month, if that was the case. Or we decide here and now that we're going to actually do the full thing on the 26th, 27th of February.
I suppose you most probably could, However, between setting our balanced budget on the 26th of February, I'll get my dates mixed up, but between February and March, we could have another distribution from the Scottish Government. So anything could happen. Again, it could be a worse settlement between February and March. So I think in terms of where we're at, is that we don't really know what's going to happen. I think for me, the process here allows some flexibility to allow for every eventuality that could still happen between now and February and between the February date and the March date. So I suppose, in essence, yes, that could happen, but at the same time, there are a number of other possibilities that could also happen between February and March. Ian?
Thank you, Chair. So, the appendix, so at the very end of that, Paul, I'm looking at the 27th of February and the 26th of March. So I just wonder what your professional view is in regards to what we should actually be agreeing on the 27th of February. I would have thought, so I'd like your professional view on that. So we've got, so this reflects what the political view was, is what I've heard Adam saying, and I think that's correct. But I just wonder what your professional view is. Should we actually take an opportunity to capture more than the 27th of February? And I just, if I can get a wee reminder on what the leader said earlier in regards to the 25th of February, I missed that. I was distracted. And the publication of actual political budget.
Paul?
Yes, I mean, in terms of the report, the report's been brought forward by myself, recognising that these are very unusual circumstances and there is a need for some member flexibility at this stage. So that timetable is certainly taken into account the political views and the discussions with groups and part of this, but it reflects my professional advice to members in terms of the appropriate timetable. In terms of what we should be doing on the 27th of February, as set out in the report, the legislation requires us to set the council tax as part of a balanced budget. Okay, what that to me means, the council's always had a long-standing protocol that when additional spending comes forward or adjustments to spending come forward, that we identify where the resources come forward at the same time. In terms of how that should affect how we move forward in terms of this process, we set a balanced budget on the 27th of February. Any changes beyond that, when we come to the 26th of March meeting, must be balanced, so we retain that balanced budget approach throughout the process.
Elaine?
I'd possibly be more of an optimist than others here, but there is still a process to be gone through within the Scottish Parliament to agree the budget. There is no agreement yet. Now, during that process, in the last 2 years, a bit more money was found for local government. And we also got, last year, we got the flexibility on, a degree of flexibility on the funding for the Health and Social Care Partnership. So we don't know, by the 27th of February, we won't necessarily know what our final settlement is. It could be, and I'm hopeful still, that there might be more money available by the 26th of March. And therefore, we don't necessarily want to be taking savings that we don't need to take. I mean, that there's no point in taking more pain than you need to. We also won't necessarily know how much money would be available for policy development. So I think we need to have that information before we actually make the final decisions on the budget. As for the issue about amendment, which Councillor Scobie brought up, the whole process has been different this year. We've published all the savings options have been in the public domain since last year. There have been months when the groups and the public have been able to see them. They've been consulted on by the public. I don't think there should be any need to make amendments on the day, that we should all be able to make, to formulate our budgets in advance of the final decision making. I don't think, it's maybe because of where I came from before this, but there's no way that the amendments to the Scottish budget would be taken on lines of the Scottish budget would be taken on the day. There would be no negotiation beforehand about amounts of money, but those decisions would be taken beforehand. And I don't think making snap decisions on transfers of pieces of money on the day is a particularly good way of doing things, particularly when we've had all this information in the public domain for months.
And I think on your first point, it rings true in the letter from the Minister for Public Finance that these are indicative allocations to local government, that they are not the final agreed. Dick?
Yeah, I think we want to avoid uncertainty. I think just checking when obviously the British government won't produce its budget until late in March. When is the final decision on the Scottish budget, Paul? When's the final?
The current timetable is for the Scottish budget to be finalised through the budget bill on the 5th of March, so that's in advance of the UK budget announcement.
Ivor?
Just clarity for myself again. The 27th of February, the balanced budget position, is that for a 1-year balanced budget, or could it be taken over a 3-year whereby you could put proposals into years 2 and 3 to balance the budget over a period of 3 years rather than balancing it in 1 year?
Paul?
I probably have to look at the detail of what you're suggesting there, Ivor, but one of the things that I'm very conscious of, and I think it's been helpful to the Council, is that the Council's agreed a set of budget principles to support budget setting in previous years. The last time they were formally considered by full Council was when we agreed the financial strategy at full Council. So one of the principles in there is that each annual budget must be balanced and balanced on a recurring basis. So I think I would seek to advise members to stick to that approach as part of budget setting.
Okay. Dick?
Thanks, Chair. I'm just thinking about what we should do at the February meeting. I think, to avoid uncertainty, I think the group should bring forward their balanced budget in an order of priority, so that people know what the priority savings are going to be. If there's less savings to be made, obviously the ones at the bottom of the savings will be taken off. So I think that meeting, if we're going to produce a balanced budget, we can say these are the proposals, but there may be less savings if we get a more favourable budget. I think that's how I would approach it.
I think this budget setting process, as outlined, gives that option to political groups if they want to do that. And I think, as it states in the report, any political group that wants to set a balanced budget and put forward a proposal can have those discussions with Paul on making sure that a balanced budget is produced, and that option is available to groups if they wish to do that. Stephen?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's just, again, maybe on the line of amendments. So when we're talking about amendments, do you mean if it's a full budget amendment as an amendment to the proposed, if you like, or do you mean an amendment as in one line of a budget? Because I think that was an earlier question seemed to allude that amendments could come on the day, and that was okay. But I think what we're really saying is no, it has to be impact assessed or considered by the finance officer so many days prior to publication, etc. So we wouldn't be looking at non-balanced complete budgets. We would just be looking at whole budgets. Is that correct?
I had referred to it would need to be competent, and my understanding is that an unbalanced budget would not be a competent proposal put forward at full council.
So we wouldn't consider single line amendments to a budget?
That wouldn't be my decision. I wouldn't be in the chair. I've just said that my understanding would be that it would need to be a competent proposal. An unbalanced budget, in my understanding, would not be a competent proposal.
Okay, and through yourself, just to the finance officer, is that the professional understanding as well?
Paul?
To be honest, in terms of what's considered on the day, it's probably more of a governance issue, but certainly any amendments I'd like to check to ensure that it retains that balanced budget approach and makes sense from a financial perspective. We can certainly do that if that's what members are looking for on the day.
Ian?
It's the same point. I mean, my understanding would have been I would like actually clarity on it, and I think maybe got it, but maybe we need to come from Lorna or Nick as well, that, okay, the proposer and the seconder of the particular budget would have to accept the amendment, and it would have to get governance clearance of competence after that, along with the chair of the meeting.
Nick?
I think certainly in line with the terms of discussion, in terms of reaching a judgment on competency, one of the aspects you would need to consider is whether the budget was in fact balanced and had been impact assessed, etc., before we could give a decision on competency. So I suspect things coming up on the day that haven't been through that process would be ruled incompetent.
Okay. Any further comments or questions? Okay, we're happy to move to the recommendations. So are we happy to note the updated timetable for the Scottish Government budget and the Local Government Finance Settlement 2021, which will now be announced on the 6th of February? Obviously, it has been announced on the 6th of February. Happy to note that. And then number 2 would be to agree the updated budget process with the amendment that was set up by the leader to have the budgets being published 3 days before the 26th of March meeting and handed into Section 85 officer 5 days before the 26th of March meeting. We're happy to accept that. Okay. Item number 5 is a local government finance settlement. This report provides members with an updated information on the current overall budget position to support political groups in the preparation of their budget proposals for the financial planning period 2021 to 2022-23. Last Thursday, our council received a local government finance settlement for 21-22 with indicative figures. Within the settlement, there are a number of responsibilities placed on our council. As detailed in paragraph 3.14, our council adjusted funding gap now stands at £10.8 million. As a result of the savings already agreed at full council in February and December last year, the remaining funding gap to be met stands at £5.197 million. Councillors are aware that since 2010, our council has had to make cuts of £106 million. This local government finance settlement will result in another £10 million worth of cuts and/or council tax rises. Despite many election statements in December, it's clear to me that austerity is far from over. Paul Garrett and Gillian Ross are here to assist with any questions on the report, and I'll open it up to member scrutiny. Elaine?
I think members who were on policy and resources will remember that last year we had a lobbying exercise in advance of the final budget settlement when we knew what the initial suggestions were. And what I would like to suggest is, although this is does not look as bad as last year's, in real terms, our budget is down by 1.1%. There may be additional money. There will be negotiations between political parties going on within the Scottish Government. And what I would suggest is that, again, that we make the case for local government getting a fair settlement. I know COSLA is doing the same thing. And also, and it's the next item on our agenda, we make particular representations about our capital investment this time, because that has declined by 17%. So that's in a worse position. So I'd like to suggest that we do, and it will have to be rather rapidly because the process is much truncated this year, but that we do make representations to both government and our local MSPs to try and argue the case for an improved settlement for us.
I'm quite happy to second that proposal. Any other questions or comments? Stephen?
Yeah, so I'm just looking at and it's more of a sort of a cautionary thing, I suppose, but 3.17 on page 7. I think we've always, in recent times, always tried to make sure that we don't set this year's budget last year. And obviously, while we're all supportive of the development of the borderlands as a council, etc., I think there is that thing where we've already allocated effectively policy development funding effectively on faith in December based on what we might decide to do in February and March. So while that's in there and we have to recognise that, we have to also then say, well, that's a limitation on what we can choose to do with policy development funding. Normally we'd like to keep a cleaner house and say, well, we'll decide that on subject to the budget, because normally we'd take decisions like that in the wider budget context. So it's just really to highlight that, because sometimes we can set ourselves up for pressures that we maybe didn't appreciate when it comes to budget setting day.
Yeah, take that point, although it was agreed by full council on that basis. Any other points that members want to raise? Nope. Are we happy to move to the recommendations? We need to put that in a minute. We're going to word it in line with the lobbying strategy. It wouldn't be. It could be a range of things rather than just a single letter. Okay. So, moving to the recommendations, are we happy to note the details of local government finance settlement 2020 for 2021? Note the specific commitments reflected in Appendix 3. Note the council's funding gap, and to note the current projections. We're happy to note those and then add in an additional recommendation that, in line with the council's lobbying strategy and the national messages that COSLA are currently engaged in, that we lobby local MSPs and political groups in the Scottish Parliament about the specific issues in the revenue budget, but then also in the capital settlement as well. You okay with that? Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the development of capital investment strategy. This report updates the Council's capital investment strategy to reflect recent developments, including the announcement of the 2020-21 local government finance settlement. As has been indicated in the paper and by COSA, we are facing a significant cut in our capital budget. Members will be aware that councils are signed up to sharing the cost of the Scottish Government's new learning estate strategy and will need to contribute to growth deals like our own Borderlands growth deal. This cut in funding will have an impact on local infrastructure and the investments we want to make here in Dumfries and Galloway. Nationally, there is a cross-party support for an increase in capital spending to invest in infrastructure. Officers are working with COSLA to establish the rationale behind the cut in the capital funding and to understand if this is a one-off cut or the new baseline. If the baseline funding has been cut, that will result in a reduction of £40 million in our capital investment strategy over the next 10 years. Before we open up for questions, I think there's been a number of concerns raised about the lack of detail on some of our current capital spending commitments and priorities set out in this paper. And I think sort of my first question would be if we're able to get a much better grasp of and a much better update on some of the capital investment priorities that we have, particularly some financial numbers that we'd be able to put into a local capital investment strategy proposal by any group.
Yes, no, recognise that in terms of the report, there's a lack of detail in terms of funding requirements in relation to various identified priority projects. We have made reference in the report to the opportunity for officers to further liaise with members and with political groups to support the development of their capital investment strategy proposals, and obviously finance will support lead officers for projects in those discussions. We've also made reference in the report to coming back to the capital investment strategy during the course of the year once we have greater details available, and certainly part of our discussions with project lead officers at the minute is trying to clarify just when we'll be able to provide members with greater detail in terms of project scopes, timescales and associated costings, and we'll look to come back to members with that information as soon as possible.
Is any members have any comments or questions? Jane?
Well, following on from what you're saying, it's really, Chairman, about the waste, the capital requirements that we need for waste, because if there's one thing that the public are excited about, apart from potholes, is waste. They want to know what's happening, and I'm a bit concerned that the information here on page 52 tells us that we will get some information on the 6th of March, but actually, arguably, that's actually beyond our first cast over producing a balanced budget, and I would say that that's a bit slow. I mean, I understand that there are problems of capacity and people are working flat out, but nevertheless, the public is expecting us to know, and we've been telling them, that what happens depends on next year's budget. In other words, the budget this year. And I don't think that this is coming forward fast enough for us to make sensible decisions. So I think I'm just putting that marker down that this isn't quick enough.
No, I'm inclined to agree, especially as this report would have came 3 or 4 weeks ago in the normal process, so there has been a bit of slippage there that could have been used. Is there any other questions or comments? Stephen?
Thanks, Chair. There's a couple of things, but specifically around the same point. So on page 46 at 314, it's talking about the potential investment priorities, and I'm looking specifically there at travelling people's sites. I'm not sure if potential investment priority is accurate, because I think that's, judging by the report that we heard over a year ago at Communities Committee in 19th of January 2019, there was a minimum standard that we have to meet for traveller sites. So I'm wondering how we ensure we meet the minimum standard within the capital investment strategy, and how we articulate that maybe a bit more strongly for things that were actually a minimum requirement for us that we haven't achieved yet. And also just on page 53, when it talks about the decision at Communities Committee over a year ago about the further options to come forward for Culzean, I really don't know where that's at, and that's a concern given the length of time it's taken and the state that we're in, and the warnings we've had and the minimum standards we've failed to reach with that. So I'm just sort of, is there a way we can accelerate priority on that, because I think we really need to address that as a matter of course.
Paul?
Certainly happy to liaise with the lead officer and try and ensure that members receive up-to-date information on the progress with this at the earliest opportunity, either through this committee or possibly more appropriately through the communities committee. So I'll speak to the lead officer about that and see when that can be brought forward.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of it being a potential investment priority, I mean, are we required to invest in that, or is it really kind of down to us whether we decide to or not?
I have to admit, I'm not sure of the detail in terms of what we're required to do, but we'll try and make sure that that's covered when the report comes forward to members.
I think it's fair to say of all the priorities, there's more information required both on the financial details but also any other legislative requirements. Ian?
Thank you. So without repeating what you've said, Jane, in regards to lack of information, but I think get the reassurances we can get into a discussion at a political level, I suppose, but with the officers concerned. But so taking for example, one of the things we did notice, they're not ranked in any way, didn't seem to be ranked, these projects. We know there's some in the pipeline, but they're not ranked. I would have thought that would be an option as we come forward. But on the Appendix 2, it's the update on the current future priority projects. First one it talks about is the White Sands. So I just wonder if there's any information there at all, Paul, or maybe will have to be picked up on later on. It says indicative was 25 million. We hear some ideas in the pipeline. That might be nearer 40 million now. We're just not sure. So have we got any idea at all how much these particular projects might have escalated?
Paul?
On the White Sands in particular, the approach we've taken is to recognise that we need to wait for the results of the public inquiry before we move forward with that scheme. What we're clear on and we've set out in the report is that the previously agreed £25 million allocation will no longer be sufficient to support the scheme. So we're anticipating having to come back to members for a further review of that whole project based on revised costings, but that information is not available at this stage.
David?
Good morning. To help Councillor Thompson with his point about the traveller sites, as I understand it, the minimum requirement is one site, and we are going to invest in Glenluce, so the simplest way to meet our minimum requirement would be to close the Cullen site.
Any other questions or comments? No. So we're therefore happy to move to the recommendations, and they are to note the 2020-21 local government finance settlement, note the funding reduction was not as anticipated, note the updates to the previously agreed capital investment strategy, note the updates to the potential priority investment projects, and note that further support will be provided to members to support their considerations. And as part of that, I think we would like to see a bit more information on the priority projects. Okay. Item number 7 is the Head of Service 6-month assessment of finance and procurement business plan. This report provides elected members with the Head of Finance and Procurement's assessment of the 6-month progress for 2019-20 on the delivery of the 2019 to 2023 business plan for the service. The report also includes more detailed information on the service risk register and the health and safety performance. Paul Garrett is here to respond to any members' questions. Is there any questions from members on the report? Ivor?
Chair, it's the red indicators that come up. Now, I realise that previous years we've seen that contracts or local suppliers coming in for contracts, there's more, it catches up as the year goes on. However, the long-term trend there is a downward trend. Is it a case of there's fewer contracts going out because we're doing less, or is it there are fewer people applying for the contracts and the contracts are a similar number?
Paul?
No, I think we're actually seeing a significant increase against that indicator in Q3 and continuing into Q4 of the financial year. It was 45 in total to end of Q2. There was actually 104 applications in Q3, largely associated with the early learning and childcare tender process. So we are actually seeing a big increase in that indicator during this period, and we expect to see that continued for the remainder of the current financial year. One of the things we have discussed is perhaps phasing that indicator a bit better, because it does tend to be the case that we're well below the halfway mark halfway through the year. So it's maybe something to look at in terms of phasing the indicator level, so that's a more appropriate assessment during the course of the year from now on.
Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It was actually on the same indicator. Obviously, I mean, we're working hard on our procurement frameworks and processes within the council. I was just wondering, do local contractors have to go through that process in order to get us to use them? Because obviously there's a resource there associated with the procurement team. There'll be frameworks there that contractors can bid into or can deliver on. But if people aren't encouraged to use that or are being given contracts without using that, I'm just wondering if is there something we can firm up there, so it's like even ones who maybe don't use these procurement processes with any familiarity can be encouraged to do so at the point of offering a service to us.
Paul?
Yeah, there has been very significant engagement with local suppliers recently to try and support them in terms of applying for council contracts. The council hosted the regional Meet the Buyer, first regional Meet the Buyer event in October last year, and there's a lot of direct contact with the providers to try and provide them with support and training and assistance to be able to apply for council contracts. So we're continually doing that to try and support the local economy, support local suppliers to be able to apply for council contracts, and that is bearing fruit in terms of the numbers that are now coming forward.
Yep.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm just sort of thinking, particularly where there's maybe well-known or what we'd consider reliable suppliers, etc., without sort of naming names or anything, where we'd maybe want to say, well, look, if you're going to be offering these services for us as a council, use this framework now, rather than maybe sticking to old arrangements. I mean, it's really about moving forward with the times. Are we doing that?
I'm not sure if I'm picking up correctly, but certainly where frameworks are in place, we do encourage that local suppliers go through that route, because that is part of best practice in terms of procurement. So, but we are working, as I say, closely with our suppliers to try and ensure that they're able and have the capability to apply through those routes.
Okay. Jeff?
Just on page 25, really to congratulate the fact that we've exceeded the percentage of staff who complete an annual performance development review, which seems to be a bit of an exception for this department. Is this reflective of some difference in the way in which these are carried out, or is it the number of staff who are involved?
It's not a change in terms of what we've seen within finance procurement for a number of years. We are heavily committed to the PDR process. We find it very effective and very helpful in terms of how it supports us in delivering our services and supports our staff as well. Within financial procurement, as well as the business plan, we have 5 individual team plans for each of the services, and the objectives for individuals within their PDRs are linked to those team plans, so there's a clear link there in terms of how we support individuals to support the service and support the council overall. So we've found that to be a very helpful part of how we manage our teams. It's something we're committed to, and we'll seek developing further as we go forward.
Willie?
Yeah, Chair, it's on page 30, my first point, and at the top there on the right-hand side, budget monitoring reports have identified the potential for service overspend. That's in social work and within education and learning. And I know it's been reported to Education Committee in terms of the 700 and odd thousand that was being taken out on additional support for learners in the need. And only this week, and indeed this morning, I've been asked the questions in terms of Aberlour and the need for additional support for those kids who do need that level of support. I just wonder when would we be in the position to know what the current situation is with that heavy 704,000 being taken out of that service, and whether the department has mitigated to the point where that savings has been identified, or indeed that it may have to be drawn from balances. And again, Chair, if I moved on to the next page, maybe take them one at a time.
Paul, do you want to sort that?
Yes, in terms of that supporting learners, saving the challenge that faced the service in terms of delivering that was fully recognised, and the papers that were issued last night for today's meeting made reference to savings that we now see as being undeliverable in the upcoming financial year, and we've reduced that saving by £145,000 to recognise the pressure on the service. In addition to that, we are currently undertaking a review between both education and social work at the minute to look at pressures on children's services across the two, and to assess the extent to which that may require some additional corporate support from budget pressures funding. We certainly look to be able to come back to members with details on that review prior to the end of the current financial year.
Willie, did you have a second question?
Yeah, Chair, it's on page 31, and I thank Paul for that explanation. I'm not sure that 100,000 is indeed enough in terms of the need of the services, and maybe we'll address that in the forthcoming budget in terms of investment in education. But it's on the approved flood prevention scheme projects, and how there is not an overspend here, but there is a delay in the service. Well, I know that the Stranraer flood prevention scheme has been outstanding for 25 years almost now. That if there's not a position of an overspend, and I'm making reference to the Stranraer flood prevention scheme, can we see this moving on at a much faster pace, rather than just looking at it for a budgetary sense, but from what the people require by way of those flood prevention schemes and preventative care for any fear of floods?
I suppose Paul will be able to answer the financial elements of that, but the responsibility lies with Communities Committee to deliver those. Paul?
Yes, absolutely, Chair. Just to add to that, I think it falls into the same category as the capital projects we were just discussing. So when we come forward with that review of when clearer information will come to members on when projects will be delivered, we'll make sure that's covered in that review at that time.
Any other questions?
I'll defer to Councillor Maitland. I don't think she's...
Jane?
Thank you very much. It's what really going on from the question on the review of savings delivery. The indicator on page 26 indicates that we are not going to make the £998,000 of savings that we thought we would in the first instance. And I know in the earlier paper on page 40, we've got an explanation, but the explanation talks about £741,000, and this is a non-achievement of 998, and I just wonder if you could reconcile it for me, please.
Absolutely. We bring more detail on the in-year shortfalls through the quarterly reports to this committee. There'll be one coming at the start of March, but the key reason for that difference is that the in-year saving is greater than the subsequent year saving because of delays. So actually there's some savings that have now been achieved partway through the year. You only get partial benefit of that in the current year, but you get the full benefit of that in the upcoming financial year. So that's why the reason is the shortfall is lesser in financial year 2021.
Stephen?
Yeah, thanks yet again, Chair. It was actually on the Appendix 1 on page 38 and 39. It's talking about the integrity group within the council, which obviously provides an assurance against prevention of sort of fraud and acts of corruption or whatever. So I'm just sort of wondering, obviously there's a risk sort of level set out there, and it sets out the kind of activities that it looks at. I'm just sort of wondering, I mean, is that something that is this the area in the report where we would see the learnings or the recommendations or the feedback from the integrity group, for example, fed back? Because presumably it meets regularly, so it would have a kind of a review and sort of looking at things, etc., being aware of these things. Will we see any output from that, or will it just filter through reports like this?
Paul?
I think this is one route, but there are specific issues that the integrity group are involved in, which in themselves will lead to reports to members. And I think those reports in particular are the areas where we'd look to bring forward those learning activities to make sure that future practice addresses any concerns or risks that have been identified. So in addition to these reports, also the individual reports on specific issues would cover those improvements in arrangements and learning activities at the same time.
Ivor?
Slightly lighter note maybe, but I think it's quite good these risk factors that actually identify all the risks. Could I just ask, what's in place when Paul and Gillian win the lottery? I notice that there's even group wins in the lottery. Do we actually say only certain people can be in certain syndicates so that, you know, we don't lose a raft of staff?
David?
You want me to answer that? I'm on page 47 and looking at a red light status, and reading the explanation here, April was a bad month, 8.76% absenteeism, and that was mainly due to long-term absences and injury. And yet, how can that be? And am I right in saying these are figures averaged out through several thousand employees, and therefore it's impossible we can have this kind of variance? I mean, I could imagine if it was based on some sort of virus that had suddenly hit, but otherwise, I don't see how September can be a third of April.
This table is specifically based on finance and procurement employees rather as council employees overall. So I think the figure is 84 in terms of our FTE that's based on. And so that is the case. April was, and fully recognise that it was a very poor month for us in terms of attendance levels, but what that graph indicates is that things have come back down to a more reasonable level subsequently. However, we do recognise need to further improve that over the remainder of the financial year and moving forward into subsequent years. And we've got a range of approaches, including early intervention approaches, to try and ensure that that's the case.
Right. So as I understand, the indicator, which looks at the effectiveness of 8-hour functions in terms of overall sickness, blah, 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 in the council, is that red? Is that in red? But your graph is only showing F&P as indicated in its title.
Yeah, no, apologies. This is a corporate indicator, but this specifically relates to the finance and procurement element of that indicator.
Right, but our general corporate indicator is red.
I've not got that information in front of me at the minute, but we can certainly find out.
Okay. Probably must be based on the other couple of meetings we've had with communities and ENR anyway, so they're always in the red, so probably it is, yeah.
Do you want to add that in? Lorna?
Overall workforce indicators are reported to ENR committee, so there's a report due to ENR committee with all the council-wide indicators in relation to workforce, and that's where that will be brought.
Is there any further questions from members? No. We're happy to move on to the recommendations, and that is to review the 6-month summary performance report. Happy that we've reviewed that, and I think it's fair to say that we've scrutinised that report. Item number 8 is the Transformation Programme Progress Report. Full Council agreed on the 27th of June 2019 the updated Transformation Programme activity, including transformation events that have been progressing to prioritise outcomes and activities. The output from these events have been developed into detailed work programmes, which are being presented to this committee. The purpose of this report is to provide elected members with an update on the activity to progress the Transformation Programme 2018 to 2023 and provide an overview of the work programme for our workforce, recycling, litter and council travel. The report has a number of work patches for us to consider. The administration does have a motion which we will circulate to actually agree that we carry out these work packages. Firstly, that we progress the work packages. Secondly, that the relevant service committees take ownership and lead on the development of them. That performance report on the transformation programme and the specific work packages is brought to this committee in November, and a financial update on the work packages is included in the local government finance settlement paper for 2021-22 in December, and we'll get that circulated in due course so that members can look at that. What we'll do is, as we've done in previous transformation updates, we'll take each activity in turn. So we'll start with council travel, and Gordon is here to update. Thank you very much. Is there anything you want to add to the report, Gordon, or do you want to go straight to questions?
Straight to questions, Chair, it's fine.
Is there any questions specifically on our council travel work package? Nope. Or would you rather we pause for 5 minutes so you can read that bit of paper and then we can go to questions? Jane?
Yes, I was just reading my notes. There was a question about installing speed limiters on all vans. Why don't we actually have speed limiters on all our vehicles, out of interest?
Sorry, was that why don't we have speed limiters on all our vehicles? Yeah. Speed limiters don't come on vehicles as standard, and because of the age of our fleet, it's not always been the process to fit it into the specifications for vehicles. So we're now going through a process. The light fleet, for example, is just short of 700 vehicles. To date, we've got just over 300 fitted with speed limiters. We're working through the rest as a priority, but we're also not going to fit limiters into vehicles that are due to come off the fleet. So we're just trying to, that's why the balance is there. HGVs do have how they come as standard.
Jane?
Thank you very much for that. Thank you for that. And the final question as well was the NHS fleet share. I'm really very keen that we do a bit more in terms of sharing and pooling our resources with big public services, and particularly, obviously, NHS is the biggest one. And I'm wondering whether that is in there as a SOP to members, because it's been going on for about 15 years that we're all going to share things and do things together, and we never do, or whether there's something really realistic under that. So if I could have a little bit of reassurance.
Gordon?
No, I'm actually meeting the transport manager for NHS, Lee, next week. We have tried in the past and failed, and there's various reasons for that, but we're going to revisit it, and we're going to look at it for an internal fleet point of view. But I think the big win on this is through ambulance transport and community transport style vehicles, minibuses or whatever, which we're working on with Douglas this afternoon. So it is on the agenda. We're looking at it seriously. It's not just there for show.
Henry?
Thanks, Chair. Gordon, it's the overview of the work programme. I just wonder if you could maybe expand a little bit on what the salary sacrifice scheme actually means, and the further down the second last work stream, the reduction of the council fleet and in-town travel, and if you could maybe confirm if in that we're actually looking at the route following the schools as well as the council offices and buildings that our workforce would attend.
Yeah, so salary sacrifice is a staff and members benefit, if you like, that quite a lot of authorities take advantage of. So it's basically the exact same as a cycle to work scheme or an electronic scheme that some authorities do as well, and the council basically makes a saving in two ways, either from the NI saving for the lack of contribution that now comes for the gross salary, or some suppliers give you a contribution per car per year that's taken on the scheme. Now, the figures that we're seeing for other authorities, depending on the take-up, are significant amount of saving. So I can't give you specifics on numbers other than what I've put in there in the 40k. That is a conservative figure, because we don't know what the take-up will be, but the saving is taken on the NI bracket for the gross figure, if that makes sense. The reduction in council travel there, basically what that is that the bigger picture in the fleet what we're trying to do is we're trying to reduce the amount of vehicles on the road. We have quite a lot of pool cars on the road, and what we've seen for analysis is a lot of journeys taken within towns or to the same destinations in the same town. Dumfries, for example, was 50% of the travel was within those locations. So what we're looking at doing is removing some of those pool cars for various locations, replace them with a smaller amount of electric cars for likes of social work who've got ad hoc requirements for travel and couldn't wait on a bus timetable, for example. And the rest of the travel will be replaced by an electric bus, which will create a route around council buildings to encompass the learning campus as well. And staff, and this is where the behavioural change comes in, staff will have to learn to go by that bus timetable when they're hopping specifically round about council buildings for meetings or visits or whatever that might be. There's obviously a revenue saving in that because we're reducing the amount of lease cars that we've got, and there's a big carbon saving to be made there as well. The biggest point is behavioural change. We can no longer have cars that were readily disposal.
Katie?
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back in on that. It's just a follow-up question on that. If we're looking to have a bus route, so to speak, going round the various buildings, would there be a central car parking option, perhaps out with the town, that council employees could leave their cars at?
We haven't considered that, to be honest. We're basing what we're looking at on employees that are already based within council buildings. In some places get sufficient parking, some places haven't. To be honest, if we're going to a sort of park and ride style thing, that's something that we need to get property and maintenance involved in, because we don't have the space in any of our, the portfolio that's there at the moment. So.
Ivor?
Is there any capital cost to any of these? We saw that we've had 17% knocked off our capital budget. I don't know, do we have an electric bus on site, or are we needing to purchase one? And just for Daft Laddie question again, it is bus, not box. BUX is in the papers. That's not the terminology for an electric bus, is it? No. Spell mistake, yeah.
Gordon?
We don't have a stock of electric buses. We do have to procure one. It is being partially funded by Transport Scotland. The cars have been fully funded by Transport Scotland, and we're still in negotiations with them as to what exactly that match funding will be. The remainder will come out the capital fleet budget for next year.
Any further questions? Stephen?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was just, and obviously the low-hanging fruit here is the potential benefits within, I'm sort of thinking of Dumfries, where the bulk of the population is and the bulk of the sort of inter-office travel would be. But I'm just sort of wondering about the rest of the region, because obviously a lot of people have a lot further to travel elsewhere. But in larger centres or larger networks, if you like, of offices or workplaces, is there, or schools even, is there any sort of work going on in that part of the region?
When you cast the net a bit wider outside Dumfries, there isn't necessarily the justification to put another bus route of that nature in at the moment. However, we are working with staff, and again it's behavioural change, and we've put a travel hierarchy to encourage staff to use pool cars, to come to fleet management to get spot hires, as opposed to claiming grey mileage. We're trying to encourage train journeys in certain trips a wee bit more. So there's work being done in the background to bring forward a process and a policy that will support that, which should streamline and funnel all other travel, so that we get the best solution.
Ian? Is there any other further questions on the council travel work package? No, we'll move on to the recycling litter. We've got Stephen Herriot and Jamie James here. Any questions on the recycling and litter work package? Willie?
Yeah, Chair, it's not so much a question, it's more, I'm looking at that on page 64 of the appendices. And it's really, the reduction in collection costs and so forth, and the lead-in time. And while it's a great idea to move towards this and a great philosophy, I think we need a great deal more discussion with members of the public on this in terms of moving on to what could be, and it says here, a 3 or 4 week collection. And I'm looking at it more, why I'm saying the great philosophy in terms of getting people to recycle more, which has been a great improvement throughout the whole region. Nevertheless, we then are moving on to, and I know there wasn't a great uptake in the food recycling out with, and we now are focusing only 6 towns. If people are finding that they have food waste in their larger bins for 3 to 4 weeks, that could have an impact on vermin, etc. So I think we've got to look at this in much greater detail, especially in terms of the long lead-in period for the reduction to 3 to 4 weeks of some 3 years. And again, on the street scene, and it's a constant dog poo, the whole thing, and there's not a community that I go to that doesn't raise this issue. So we're not achieving what we hope to do with responsible dog owners and people who do drop litter. So I think we're going to really look at this and see whether what is possible, and particularly the 3 to 4 weeks for general bin collection. So I'm not too sure on your motion. I think we need to build in there. We really need to look at this in greater detail.
Just in terms of the motion, obviously, all these details would have to be agreed by Communities Committee if the FPT today were to agree to the motion set down by the administration, but I'll let Stephen come in.
Thanks, Chair. The reduction in the frequency of the waste collection for the residual waste, it was discussed in some length at both transformation, recycling and litter events. So it's something that we felt was important to keep on the agenda and as the options going forward. What we do realise, and we've put quite a long time scale in terms of this being a possible implementation, and the fact that we're not, putting a figure there in terms of what possible savings there could be because of the evaluation that's required. What we're proposing in terms of a programme for this is that over the next year we roll out the new service across the region, and then we'd establish a baseline for that service with monitoring and how it's being used with the fortnightly residual collection, with the dry recyclates and the paper card, alternating between that. And what we want to do is build up over probably a period of about a year that kind of picture in the baseline as we look at further options sometime in the future for reducing that residual waste collection. And it would be consistent with a number of other authorities that have moved to that lesser frequency on the residual waste on the basis that they can see increased in the recycling element.
Willie?
Yeah, Chairman, often what the intention is not always what is read in the report. And what people are reading into this is that we're moving on to a 3 or 4 week collection. So I think we need to spell out what we're doing and why we're doing it, but to give greater consideration and indeed taking the public with us if that is the intention, the route of travel. So, what people are reading is, the council's moving into a 3 week lift. That's what they read from this. And I think that will be highlighted. So we need to spell out what this means and not just accept it, that this is where we're going. Others have looked at other authorities and they find that it was maybe not the best way to travel, moving on to a 3 and 4 week. So I think we've got to take everything into consideration if it's a consideration we move forward on.
No, in consideration, just have to bring it. I think Stephen outlined there that obviously there's an agreed process that we're going to go to, and there may be trends and people may change in how they dispose of their waste, and we would have to respond to that, and that would have to be agreed by Communities Committee in due course. But I think, certainly from what I heard from Stephen, is that is years away from even looking at those considerations. Jane?
Again, it's rather the same sort of theme, Chairman. The NHS, through the IJB, is looking at waste, its own waste management. And again, through the sustainability and modernisation programme that is ongoing at the moment, there is actually a theme about dealing with waste. And I would like confirmation that we are exploring that at this point as well, because now is the time, now that we have been freed up from the previous shackles, shanks. So I would like to have some confirmation that that is actually actively in discussion at the moment, please.
Stephen?
We can certainly speak with the NHS and take that forward in terms of the proposals and the plans that we have with the transformation project, and we can look at where there's synergies and working together. I know in the past we have worked with NHS and we've handled some of the waste when we've had capacity in the Ecodeco MBT. Certainly one of the proposals here is that we look at, as we move out the recycling and the curbside, the waste decrease coming into the MBT. One of the options is, do we evaluate that we can take some of that waste? And one of the options is really the modelling of that to determine if that's a more efficient or more economic process. So yes, we'll task the team to talk with the NHS.
Jane?
Chairman, that's very encouraging. I wonder if that could be explicitly mentioned so that it can be followed up, because at the moment the actual piece of paper simply talks about talking about other local authorities, not talk about our partners locally, and I think it would be helpful if communities was able to follow that up as an explicit question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's on page 63, and in view of the paper we had earlier regarding the capital budget, we've got a line here about taking 400,000 out of revenue expenditure for maintenance and putting it into the capital programme. Really, is that going to have to be reassessed potentially on the basis of the new capital settlement? And the next question is the removal of the fire risk insurance. I've just a wee bit of reassurance that an extremely thorough risk analysis has been done on this, and that any capital expenditure, again, that you've highlighted here is going to be robust to the level to make sure that we don't face a catastrophic loss potentially due to fire.
Stephen?
Thanks, Chair. So the capitalisation of the element of the Ecodeco maintenance budget that's actually on the revenue account, there's about 400,000 worth of works that could be treated as capital in terms of its renewals of significant plant and equipment particularly within the MBT and in some of the household waste recycling centres. The proposition there that we're seeking to move forward with is actually we take that out of the baseline budget in the infrastructure asset class. So we actually use capital from that to give us a saving within the revenue budget, and it just means that we're doing slightly less in terms of other infrastructure assets from the baseline budget in the infrastructure asset class. And we would report that to Communities Committee in terms of the proposals for the year ahead when we come to the March committee meeting on that. In terms of the fire risk assurance, the fire risk insurance, what we're seeing there is that the details that we have for the current insurer are such that we could probably reduce by a significant amount, and we've put a figure of about 150,000 in there. It's subject to retendering, which is going to happen in a couple of years' time anyway for the council in terms of its risk, its insurance portfolio of property. We reckon that carrying a greater risk for the council at the top end of the rebuild cost of an Ecodeco plant could save us that 150,000. And to mitigate some of that risk from a kind of complete wipeout of the plant due to fire, we have capital set aside that was agreed by full council when we went through the termination of the PFI contract for mitigation works to bring assets up to a good standard. And part of that was to look at increasing the capacity for fire suppression and fire detection. And the proposal in terms of a project here is that we take that forward, working through Waste Strategy Subcommittee and Communities Committee. We will talk about the risk and we'll talk about the project to actually increase the fire detection and fire mitigation within the plant itself, with a view to making this saving.
David?
Thank you. apologies, this is somewhat anecdotal evidence, but I've talked to a worker in the Household Waste Recycling Centre, and he was saying that he didn't really feel that the union could adequately represent his ideas about how things could be better, and he didn't feel it was appropriate for him to go to one of these transformational events. So I tried to encourage him to go to it. But is there a way that we can talk to the front line, both in household waste recycling and right through the piece here?
So the proposal here for adjusting the hours on, on the household waste recycling centres will involve staff consultation. So staff will have the chance. We'll go through a process similar to the consultation we've done with staff on changing the refuse collection system. And there's been staff representatives. Some of them are union, some of them are non-union. But they're in effect going through the process where they represent the views of all their staff across the household waste recycling centres as we move forward, looking at changes in hours. If there are particular ideas, we have my service as a staff communications team, and I have representation from the household waste recycling centres, from the refuse collection crews in each of the 4 areas. If the staff want to, they can get in touch with me direct, and I can give them details. They can talk to me about feeding that into my staff communications team, or they can talk to the representatives on the ground, and we can feed that into the staff comms team. So there's 2 kind of mechanisms there, through my staff communications team or through the consultation that we will undertake in changing the proposal to change the household waste recycling centre hours.
Stephen?
Yeah, thank you. I suppose the good thing about unions is that you can choose whether or not you want to still be a member of them if they're not delivering what you need. But just one of the other things was on page 63, Appendix 2, it's got the extra column at the end. I'm just sort of aware of the change to the recommendations, but there is investment required to deliver column at the end, which effectively says funding's required for a number of the things to take forward the initiative. So I'm just kind of wondering if we can maybe take a bit more care about that, because we might be agreeing to say, well, we need to employ this number of people or invest this amount of money. But obviously that'll come back to communities. So I'm just sort of wondering, is there maybe something in the wording, because I don't know if we're agreeing to spend money or if we're agreeing to look at spending money based on a business case. So it's really just to get that clarity. The other 2 appendices don't have that column, so it's only specific to the waste one.
I suppose we have just left a union, so your first point's entirely valid. But the motion that's laid out here from the administration is that Communities Committee will take responsibility for leading that. Communities Committee will have to make decisions on this. It's just that obviously we've led on a transformation programme up until this point. There's some proposals here that are still at scoping stage, and it'll be up to Communities Committee to take further decisions once more detail is available, and in particular on where those savings might be made or where those changes might be made. Okay.
It's just, if we're agreeing the work programme, just for the specific one about recycling, I'm just thinking if we're agreeing that Communities Committee take forward the work programme, I think there's a wee emphasis there on what we're actually agreeing in terms of if we're agreeing to spend based on this as the work programme, or if we're agreeing that communities, do you see what I mean? There's a wee semantic issue there, so it's really just to get that comfort.
Lorna?
I think officers have tried to indicate where there might be spend requirements, but they would be subject to a decision by members, so there is no commitment in this paper to spend any money, and it would come back through the appropriate routes and delegations.
Okay. Willie?
Yeah, Chair, I hadn't looked, I've looked at it, but I didn't know we were dealing with the motion, but just on 4, bracket 4 there, point 4, agree the work programme for transforming, but it goes on to, will lead the delivery of this programme. I would like to see that amended to look at the transform and recycling and later in greater detail, particularly on the impact this would have on the public, rather than just, what this says here will lead the delivery of this programme. Just to accept that amendment, Chair.
Sorry, I didn't actually hear the first point that you made.
Yeah, from the point, the committee will look at the transforming, where it will, rather than lead, will look at the transform and recycling and litter in greater detail, particularly on the impact this would have on the public. It's rather than saying deliver the programme.
It's already in Communities Committee delegations to scrutinise how those services are ran. The decision here today is to simply say that there's a package of work that could be undertaken here. That package of work should continue. But essentially there's a number of elements here that need further work done on them. There are a number of elements such as the one you're talking about, that the new waste recycling system will be rolled out in due course. That still has to take place before any further decisions can be taken on what that looks like in the future. So, Communities Committee will be given, the remit here to take on that work programme, but any further change would need to be decided by Communities Committee and would be scrutinised by Communities Committee.
Yeah, Chair, but me looking at that would say the emphasis is lead the delivery of this programme. What I'm saying in my amendment is to look at it in greater detail. That's all my amendment is asking for.
I think that's encapsulated, but certainly that's what the wording of this motion tries to set out. Lead to delivery. Up until now, this committee's been leading it. So the only thing that's going to change is that it will now be the responsibility of Communities Committee. Communities Committee will still have to scrutinise any proposals that come forward, and will have to take a decision on any proposals that come forward.
Okay, so it's a déjà vu, Chair, in terms of wording. And what I'm asking is that rather than the delivery, that the amendment I'm putting forward is look at the transform and recycling and litter in greater detail, particularly on the impact this would have on the public.
Okay, well,
if we're both saying the same, then would you accept my amendment then?
We can maybe look at it when we come to the recommendations. Henry?
Stephen, it was on the household waste recycling centre, the aligning the hours, the 4 larger sites open to 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. Is that proposal going to be seasonal, or is that all year round?
What we're proposing there is not necessarily seasonal. It's all year round in terms of moving to that consistent opening hours across the 4 larger sites through the year.
Elaine?
Well, just in response to Councillor Scobie's point, I just wonder whether if we said we'd consider and lead the delivery, that might mitigate any fears that we've actually made a decision in handing it over, but that some of these issues are still to be considered.
Yeah, we can take that at the recommendations. Katie?
Thank you, Chair. It's on a similar point, really, that as an option, we could look at agreeing the work in principle and that it would be delivered, because essentially we do need to put our backing to this in order for the work to progress. So I don't know if Councillor Scobie would be happy to put in the word in principle there.
Is there any further questions on the recycling and litter? Aye.
Chair, it's to do with the transfer of this maintenance budget. Now, we're talking about moving it from revenue to capital. If we agree that work programme, are we actually setting that as part of the budget today? Because come the 27th of March, we will set a capital strategy at full council, which might actually reduce the asset class capital programme. That will then go to the relevant committee, which they might actually say, well, we don't want to cut spend on bridges, roads, etc., because we've got that many potholes. So how do we actually deliver that if members decide, no, you'll spend the asset money on what needs done? Because the old saying, a stitch in time saves 9. If we don't fix the potholes this year, they're 10 times worse next year.
I think we need to be clear on what we're agreeing here today. It's these work packages that are potential options. The decision on what the capital investment strategy for the infrastructure budget asset class currently sits with communities. Communities has to make that decision unless there's a budget decision later on in February or in March to amend what that capital asset budget looks like. So today we're not making that decision that we'll put that into the infrastructure asset class. That would be a decision of Communities Committee.
Could you remind me when the Communities Committee is, if we're going to be implementing this in March, between March and April?
Do you have that to hand?
So the Communities Committee is meeting on the 10th of March, and it will consider the capital investment for the infrastructure asset class, which it would be important to set that so that we can then progress those surface dressing schemes and surfacing schemes that we need long lead times to plan for. But it is something we've taken back in the past where it has needed to be adjusted.
How can you do that when you haven't set the budget until the 27th of March? If you're setting a capital plan in the 10th, before you've actually set how much money?
That'll be a matter for Communities Committee. Any further questions on the recycle?
It was merely just the points being brought up, Chair. So just so I'm clear in my own understanding in regards to the wording, because if, for what I've heard for you, so take 4, recommendation 4 is what the administration proposed. So agree the work programme for transforming, recycling and the letter appendix 2, and then it says, and that the Communities Committee will lead. Is it a note that the Communities Committee leads on this subject? Because you're saying that's already in place. I would agree with that. That's my understanding too. So if that's the case, I don't know if we've actually got the remit to say that instruct them to lead in it, if they're already leading it already. And that's, to me, how the language is presented.
Yeah. No, I think at the moment, in terms of our delegations, we have a delegation to lead on the transformation programme. I think whatever the wording is that we agree today, that we want to see some of these issues, some of them won't progress, but some of them will. And we want to see that the options that we do want to take on to actually progress for all of them, for council travel, for recycling litter and for our workforce. Have we exhausted recycling litter and we'll move on to our workforce? Has any member got any questions on our workforce as Paul is here to answer them? Nope. David?
Thank you, Chair. There seemed to be a list of initiatives here to help our workforce, and very little about how this would help the council. So I attended one of these events, and it seemed to me we were considering this without considering the options. For example, compulsory redundancy. How can we have done that? I mean, this is not a transformation programme at all, is it?
Paul?
If the council would intend putting a redundancy policy in place, then obviously we would have provided that as part of the considerations. We have a current status on redundancies, and therefore that's why it's not a component of the transformation programme.
We had a transformation process which didn't look at transformative ideas, whether they be popular or not popular. We've just got, a range of measures to help our workforce here. It's not about transforming the council, let's be honest. And so I won't be agreeing to this element.
Okay, Jane.
Well, I'm perfectly enthusiastic about what's being proposed here, because if you have well-motivated, well-educated, skilled workforce, they tend to do a better job than those who are less well-skilled, less well-motivated, and have less opportunities. So I'm quite happy with this as it goes forward. I would also add that I think it's really good to have people who are able to use their skills across various services, because I think it's good for them. I think it's more interesting, and I think it expands people's horizons, and I think it's really important, particularly for an area like ours, which actually hangs on to people, and there's a danger of people getting stuck, so they don't actually get the advantages of seeing other teams, other training. So I'm absolutely pro this. Away we go.
Any further questions or comments? David?
Just to answer Jane there, she makes a valid point. Yeah, yes, definitely we should look after our workforce and train them, but we're trying to manage a massive downsizing of the council, and this just addresses a part of that. It's crazy, and to call it a transformation programme is abuse of the language.
Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Any other questions? Jock?
It's mere a comment, Chair, but I think it's very interesting how the staff have responded some of the meetings that's been held over the peace and discussing what could be done to improve the service. And I think at the end of the day, the people that do the job are the people to ask about these things, and no for us to make decisions for them. And I think there's some good stuff in here, and if we can retain more staff, so much the better. I think certainly my idea is certainly not to get rid of staff just for the sake of getting rid of them. So no, I welcome this report. I think it's good. It's good that the staff participated so well.
David?
Can I help Jock here? We're going to have to get rid of staff. It's about getting rid of the ones that we want to get rid of and keeping the ones that we'd like to keep, and not just the ones who've got better opportunities. And the people to ask about how the council should manage its business are the residents of Dumfries and Galloway, and not only the employees who, by their nature, have a very vested interest in skewing it one way.
Is there any other further questions on the report?
Maybe it should be better be careful what we wish for.
Okay. Tommy?
I certainly don't like the use of the language, staff we don't want anymore, staff we want rid of. You know, and we should remember that every member of staff we get rid of is adding to the workload of their colleagues, and that shouldn't be forgotten in this.
I would agree. Any further questions on our workforce work package? Nope. Is there any questions on the report as a whole? Heather is here to answer any questions on the covering report. No? Okay, so shall we move to the recommendations? I think Nick has helpfully dug out the delegations to our committee, and 5.5.2 states that the delegation to Finance Procurement Transformation Committee is strategic oversight of and leadership in the Council's transformation programme. I think certainly what the aim of the administration is to say that we have led these specific work packages up until now. There's some work streams that are there to be explored. There are some in the instance of recycling litter and looking at the infrastructure asset class. There's decisions there to be made for those committees. And certainly our aim here is to say to the various committees, there are 3 work packages here. There's work to be done, work to be explored, but essentially that would sit better with those relevant committees in terms of making those decisions. And then later on this year, bring back a progress report on where we are at. Because we're focused on very specific work streams there. I think there's a broader bit of work to be done within these services that came out in the transformation events. So in terms of the recommendations that are here, are we happy to accept them as proposed? Willie?
But Chair, I hear what you've said, and I'm in favour of the communities looking at this. But it's on that basis then, and I've heard what others have said. So again, I would move on point 4. Agree the work programme for transport and recycling and litter at Appendix 2, and that the Communities Committee will look at this at transforming recycling litter in greater detail, particularly on the impact this would have on the public.
That's fair enough, Willie. Katie came up with a helpful suggestion about agreeing in principle.
Chair, I'm moving this as the amendment to point 4. I've listened to what they've said. Right. I'm saying let's look at it in greater detail.
Okay, is it Ivor?
Chair, when you read your proposal, they're being asked to lead the delivery. So today we're agreeing this to be done. That's what we're agreeing, because they're going to deliver it. We're telling them what to do. Right? As such, this has not been impact assessed. Now, no budget plan or policy or formal adoption of a plan should be done without a impact assessment. This isn't here. It says here clearly it hasn't been done because we're not doing it. But this clearly states that we are asking them to lead to deliver this. They are delivering what we've told them to deliver. So I would say we need to have this impact assessed before we can agree your proposal.
Ian?
And just as a small example, I think the £400,000 revenue being capitalised, Malcolm asked the question in regards to the detail of that. It was a very, very broad answer. We don't actually understand what the impact is on the capital plan, including the 17% reduction, because we haven't had the finalised figures. So I think Ivor's got a valid point when it comes to I think it's well meant, maybe what you presented, but I think he's got a valid point when it comes to actual governance and competency.
But as I said earlier on, in terms of actually determining what is spent in the infrastructure asset class, is not a decision for this committee, it's a decision for Communities Committee. So I think that they're agreeing in principle, because all we want to do here is to give the leadership and the delivery of this to those service committees. Katie?
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back in. I mean, I don't know if Councillor Scobie has a seconder for his proposal, but certainly I'll go back to my suggestion that if we put in principle, and obviously, we do need to have full economic impacts done on all our proposals, but this is a strategic overview, and certainly I would once again put that we have agree in principle to the recommendations.
Tommy? Stephen?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Councillor Hagman's kind of got probably a practical way forward, but there is something about, I'm not sure if this committee is meant to recommend recommendations to full council rather than instruct other committees directly. However, I think what we're basically saying is we like what's come out of the transformation programmes and we want to then take them forward in the proper way. Now, obviously, then the job of this committee is done in that sense until it sort of monitors, etc. But how we best do that, I suppose governance advice will say, well, it goes to that committee to take that forward. They'll then determine what budgets or options need to be taken forward, etc. So I think it sounds like we're kind of just wanting to make sure we do this the right way, but we're not against what the transformation exercise has kind of brought out in the main. So in that case, if it's expedient, I'll happily second Councillor Hagman's counter amendment, whatever it might be.
We can clear all that up. Nick?
Hopefully. In relation to the recycling and litter matter, and the other matters also, in essence, we aren't taking any final decisions today. We are putting forward the proposal that, for example, Communities Committee lead on looking at the recycling and litter overall, and come back and consider options, including at which point those options would be impact assessed. So nothing would be going forward without having gone through the process of impact assessment, as such proposals need to. But just to clarify that we're not committing communities at this stage to undertaking expenditure. We're not tying their hands at this point.
Okay, so there's a proposal there, there's a second proposal. We can tie up what wants the motion and the amendment. Are we just moving to a vote, or is there any further proposals there? David?
What item are we voting on?
Item 8.
What happened to item 3? I take this is the valid document that was delivered to us, is it?
Yeah.
So what happened to 3? Are we starting with 8? Number 3 on this piece of paper. Are we at number 8?
So are you talking about the transformation principles?
Handed this draft motion, is it complete within itself? Is it one single motion? Can one amend part of it?
I'm not quite sure what you're getting at. Obviously, there's highlighted bits, and that's to demonstrate where it's different to the recommendations as set out in the paper.
I've completely lost the plot here. I got this piece of paper here with some yellow markings on it.
Yeah.
I personally think the transformation programme has failed to be transformative, and it's a stitch-up. number 3, I definitely don't agree with, and I'd like your guidance on how do I state my objection to it. Do we go through the palaver of an amendment with no seconder? Can I go straight to dissent? How do I handle that?
Well, if that's your view, then you would have a motion of the wording of your choosing, but I'm presuming it's not either of the two that are already set down. So if you've got a motion, then you can state that. Maybe
completely lost
So-
here.
so maybe what we
A
need to do
motion
is
on the draft motion. There's an amendment to the draft motion. Is there by Councillor Hislop? Is that right?
No. What I'll do, Nick, do you want to read out what the motion and amendment is?
Okay, I'll seek to clarify for members then the position. So the motion, i.e. the sheet circulated to all members with the highlighting in yellow, proposed by Councillor Hagman and seconded by Councillor Thompson. So it's as circulated, but with the caveat that with the wording "agree in principle" in the relevant parts. The amendment proposed by Councillor Scobie, seconded by Councillor Sloan, which is basically the same as the motion circulated with the highlighting in yellow, but in relation to item 4, where it's talking about recycling and litter, Councillor Scobie put forward, and he'll correct me, I'm sure, if I don't get his wording quite correct, that this is to be looked at in greater detail and to be and for the impact on the community of the proposals to be considered.
Just on the first one there, rather than agree, rather just note, and just to what you've said, I'm quite happy with what you've read it. To note.
To note.
Okay, so we've got a motion and amendment. We'll proceed to a vote. David?
Yeah, so does this motion then pass if it gets through here? How do I state that I do not agree clause 3?
Well, you can put forward your own motion.
When?
Well, now, because we're about to proceed to a vote.
Right. So my motion includes the words do and not before agree in number 3.
Okay. Do you have a seconder?
No. No, I don't have a seconder.
Okay. Right. Ivor?
Chair, could I move that we agree point 1, agree point 2 in your draft motion, then agree to delegate to the appropriate committees any further action with regard to all of the proposals?
I think we could maybe do to see what that we could do to see that in writing.
Chair, it's just 1 and 2 is yours, and to agree that we delegate to the appropriate committees to take forward the programmes.
And is that all 3 of the programmes?
If we agree the work programmes for transforming, agree the programmes, we're agreeing a plan. And by doing that, we can't change that plan within 6 months because we've taken a council decision unless it's recalled, etc. So it hasn't been impact assessed, as it clearly states at 5, so we can't agree a plan, but we can agree to move it forward to the appropriate committee to deal with in their position. As
No,
the delegate.
just in terms of, are you just agreeing that all 3 should be delegated to the relevant committee, or are you sort of amending ours to say agree that the work programme on transforming our workforce is delegated to Common Resources and doing them all separately?
Put them all in together and it saves having more paper wasted, that all of them go forward to the appropriate committee.
Right. Nick, do you want to make sure you've got that? Right. Cool.
Does that refer?
Yeah.
Does that only refer to section? Does that only refer to sections 3, 4, and 5? Because section 6 is a comprehensive progress report back to this committee.
Happy to incorporate 6, 7 and 8.
Right, okay, I think we've got there. David?
I wish to have my dissent recorded to...
We normally take a vote
point 3.
first.
We had, well, my motion failed due to a lack of seconder.
Yeah.
Will this be then recorded at the end of everything?
We usually take a vote first. What I'll do is I'll get Nick to read out the motion, amendment and counter amendment, and then we'll proceed to a vote.
Wait a minute. So whatever the outcome, I will dissent from every outcome. Is that right? Because my point has failed. So whatever the outcome, I'm recorded as dissenter. Is that right? Or do I have to be here to do that?
It's up to you how you vote, but I think, Nick, can you read out the motion, amendment and counter amendment, and then we'll proceed to a vote.
Right, so the motion as circulated on the separate sheet with the yellow highlighting, proposed by councillors Hagman, seconded by councillor Thompson, with the caveat that the words agree in principle be inserted. The amendment proposed by councillor Scobie, seconded by councillor Sloan, again it's as circulated on the separate sheet with the exception of item 4 in relation to recycling and litter, where we would simply note that item and also suggest that the matter be looked at in further detail, and the impact on communities of the proposals be considered. And then moving to the counter amendment proposed by councillor Hislop and seconded by councillor Carruthers. So again, the separate sheet circulated with the highlighting in yellow. 1 and 2 as they appear on the sheet, and then the change being for the other items to agree to delegate any further action to appropriate committees, and perhaps councillor Hislop can clarify for me the comment about items 6 and 7 that was made towards the end.
6, 7 and 8 just included as per written in the paper.
Okay, so are members as clear as they can be on that before we proceed to the vote? Okay. So, Chair?
Abstain.
Vice Chair? Councillor McClellan?
Motion.
Councillor Brodie?
No, I think we need to be clear in the process. It should be between the counter amendment and amendment first.
Okay.
Start again, it's not that.
Okay, so we'll vote on the Sorry, apologies, members. We'll vote on the counter amendment and the amendment. So, Chair?
Still abstain.
Abstain.
Councillor Brodie? This is the counter amendment moved by councillor Hislop, the amendment moved by councillor Scobie. Councillor Carruthers?
Counter amendment.
Councillor Davidson?
Abstain.
Councillor Fairbairn?
Counter amendment.
Councillor Giusti?
Counter amendment.
Councillor Hagman?
Abstain.
Councillor Hislop? Councillor James?
Counter amendment.
Councillor Johnston? Councillor Lever?
Abstain. Abstain.
Councillor McKee?
Abstain.
Councillor Maitland?
Counter amendment.
Councillor Murray?
Abstain.
Councillor Scobie?
Amendment.
Councillor Sloan?
Amendment.
Councillor Stitt?
Abstain.
And Councillor Thompson?
Abstain.
Okay, so voting on the counter amendment and the amendment is as follows. We have 9 abstentions, 8 in favour of the counter amendment and 2 in favour of the amendment. Therefore, the amendment falls and we now move to a vote on what now becomes the substantive amendment or the counter amendment and the motion. So that's the motion being proposed by Councillor Hagman and the counter amendment as moved by Councillor Hislop. Okay, so I'll proceed to the vote. Chair.
Motion.
Vice Chair.
Motion.
Councillor Brodie. Well, we'll call it, right, just for the sake of clarity, we'll call it the amendment, okay? Councillor Carruthers.
Amendment.
Councillor Davidson.
Motion.
Councillor Fairbairn.
Amendment.
Councillor Giusti.
Amendment.
Councillor Hagman.
Motion.
Councillor Hislop. Councillor James.
Amendment.
Councillor Johnston.
Amendment.
Councillor Lever.
Motion.
Councillor McKee.
Motion.
Councillor Maitland.
Amendment.
Councillor Murray.
Motion.
Councillor Scobie.
Amendment.
Councillor Sloan. Councillor Stitt.
Motion.
Councillor Thompson.
Motion.
Okay, voting was as follows: 9 in favour of the motion, 10 in favour of the amendment. Therefore, the amendment is carried.
David?
Having voted for the amendment as least worst option, but can I dissent?
No. You voted.
So actually, you've got no chance, have you, to get through this? I mean, I'd have to vote for it knowing what was going to fall to
I think
be able to
we've
dissent.
exhausted this point. Let's move on to item number 9, which is the Community Asset Transfer Report. This report provides members with an update on the Council's Community Asset Transfer Procedure and requires updates to be made to the Disposal and Acquisitions Policy. Members will recall that there were aspects of the procedure which the former Policy and Resources Committee had indicated should be considered in the process. The updating of the procedure set out in this report brings together the learning from the CATs to date, as outlined in the annual reports, the CAT conditions agreed by Policy and Resources Committee and the delegations to this committee. Colin Freeman is here to assist with any members' questions. Is there any questions for Colin? Nope. We're happy to move, Stephen.
So it's just a couple of things about the actual changes to the disposal and acquisitions policy. And I think it's maybe in the steps on page 82, where it sets out when after a property has been declared surplus to the council requirements, the following steps will be followed. And it's about how I think as members, we get circulated every month a kind of a list of properties that are being considered for being declared surplus, etc., and the various statuses of those. But it's not necessarily always clear to, not even community council so much, but even community groups, how that information then gets out, because later on in this document, there's certain points at which if somebody's putting in an offer for something, where it's a private concern or whatever, that maybe rules out an asset transfer at a stage 1 basis, but when you get to stage 2, that puts a block on it. So I think there's maybe something about how we keep our communities informed that we could look at in those steps as set out on page 82. That's just a sort of thought as it occurs, really.
Chair, firstly, apologies from Jamie Ferguson. The weather made it impossible for him to travel today. But in response to Councillor Thompson, what we've tried to do is to provide as much clarity as possible in terms of
the two processes we have, the disposal and acquisition and the community asset transfer. If there's still a little bit more clarity that needs done, then we'll definitely take that feedback on board and act upon that.
Lorna?
Councillor Thompson, can I just add that members of full council agreed a process where we inform area committees, that we try to canvass community councils, and we'll continue to look at that and come back to you with any further steps we need to take. But members were clear about making sure that we exhausted advising and telling the community and through members of any surplus properties before we proceed on a formal sale, to see if there's any interest.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, no, I appreciate that, and quite rightly so, but I think it wasn't quite explicit in here in that process. It was really just to tie those two things together. Thank you.
Elaine?
Very minor point on page 83, 5.1 says that the PAS manager shall prepare a report to Policy and Resources Committee. In fact, it should be a report to Finance, Procurement and Transformation now.
We'll get that changed. Katie?
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a question on page 82 in regards to disposal by lease. Now, it makes reference to the Strategic Asset Board there. However, my question is, at what point do we review the leases that we may have set in place? Do they get reviewed, and who reviews them?
Lorna?
Can I clarify just around in relation to CATs or leases around CATs?
So
Councillor
in
Hagman?
relation to where communities, their village halls, etc., are under long-term leases, either 5 years, 2 years, or subsequently longer, where that lease is then being reviewed perhaps on a 2-year basis, do we ever actually review the terms of those leases? And if we do, who does it? And when would that be done?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of leases, that would be Property and Architectural Services that review the leases, and they are in regular communication with the leaseholders to make sure that things are as relevant and as appropriate as possible in terms of the clauses and conditions for those leases.
Okay, any further questions? No, we're happy to move to the recommendations then. The recommendation is that we're asked to agree the changes to the disposal and acquisitions policy as detailed in paragraphs 4.2 and 4.5. We're happy to agree? Perfect. Item number 10 is any other urgent business. I have not been notified of any other urgent business, so we'll move on to item number 11, which is the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. The members agree to adopt a resolution to exclude the public from the meeting in terms of section 50A4, paragraphs 5 and 6 of part 1 of the Schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Jane?
Could you just explain for the public who might be interested why this is being taken in private?
Lorna?
Refer to the officers who presented the report. I think probably the governance officers will be able to refer to the schedules that